One of the key concepts Sigmund Freud characterizes in his psychoanalytic theory is the idea of psychic determinism. Let's first talk about determinism in general. Determinism is the view that free will is an illusion and that our behavior is governed by internal or external forces over which we have no control. Consequently, our behavior is viewed as predictable. The causal laws of determinism form the basis of science. An example of an external force would be the influence of parents when rewarding certain behaviors, whereas an example of an internal force would be hormones influencing the way in which someone behaves. However, while determinism is the view that we have no control over our behavior, there are varying degrees of determinism, including hard and soft determinism. Hard determinism is the view that forces outside our control, for example biology or past experiences, shape our behavior. Hard determinism is seen as incompatible with free will. Soft determinism, however, is an alternative position favored by many psychologists, according to which behavior is constrained by the environment or biological makeup, but only to a certain extent. Soft determinism suggests that some behaviors are more constrained than others and that there is an element of free will in all behavior. This was the view of Nick Heather, who proposed that while our behavior is predictable, that doesn't make it inevitable. We can choose how to behave, but normally we only have a limited number of behaviors to choose from. Free will is the idea that we can play an active role and have choice in how we behave. The assumption is that individuals are free to choose their behavior and are self-determined. For example, people can make a free choice as to whether to commit a crime or not. Therefore, a person is responsible for their own actions, and it is impossible to predict human behavior with any precision. Now that we've discussed free will and the varying degrees of determinism, let's talk about the types of determinism. Firstly, biological determinism refers to the idea that all human behavior is innate and determined by genes. Research into the human genome provides evidence to support the idea of biological determinism. For example, research has found that a particular gene, IGF2R, is implicated in intelligence. Furthermore, Shorley in 1998 reported a statistically significant association between IQ test scores and the IGF2R gene on chromosome 6, suggesting that intelligence is to some extent biologically determined. Secondly, environmental determinism is the view that behavior is determined or caused by forces outside the individual. Environmental determinism posits that our behavior is caused by previous experiences learned through classical and operant conditioning. For example, Bandura in 1961 found that children with violent parents are more likely to become violent parents themselves as a result of observational learning. Finally, psychic determinism claims that human behavior is the result of childhood experiences and innate drives, id, ego, and superego, as in Freud's model of psychological development. Psychic determinism is a type of determinism that theorizes that all mental processes are not spontaneous but are determined by the unconscious or pre-existing mental complexes. It relies on the causality principle applied to psychic occurrences in which nothing happens by chance or by accidental arbitrary ways, and is one of the central concepts of psychoanalysis. Thus, slips of the tongue, forgetting an individual's name, and any other verbal associations or mistakes are assumed to have psychological meaning. Psychoanalytic therapists will generally probe clients and have them elaborate on why something popped into their head or why they may have forgotten someone's name rather than ignoring the material. The therapist then analyzes this discussion for clues revealing unconscious connections to the slip of verbal association, as we discussed in our most recent video on the Freudian free association method in psychoanalytic therapy. Psychic determinism is related to the overarching concept of determinism, specifically in terms of human actions. Therapists who adhere to the belief in psychic determinism assume that human action and decisions are predetermined and are not necessarily under their own control. In 1901, Sigmund Freud published The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, in which he detailed the importance of generally trivial or overlooked details in therapy sessions. It was in this work that Freud began to refer to seemingly unintended slips of the tongue. Freud interpreted these slips of the tongue as the result of unconscious desires or impulses. During psychoanalytic therapy sessions, Freud would dissect and question participants if they made a mental lapse or a slip of the tongue, as he believed this would allow him an understanding of the unconscious motives of his patient. Although the Freudian slip is considered the most popularized example of psychic determinism from Freud's work, this concept of determinism is not the only one. The term psychic determinism encompasses other forms of mental lapses, such as forgetting someone's name. So, to summarize, the principle of psychic determinism holds that everything we do has meaning and purpose and is goal directed. There is no such thing as random or meaningless behavior for a psychoanalytically inclined observer. This assumption allows the observer to utilize an exceptionally large amount of data in searching for the roots and meaning of a person's behavior and feelings. Everything from an offhand comment to a mundane pattern of behavior to bizarre behavior, dreams, idle passing thoughts, slips of the tongue, even the contents of delusions and hallucinations, has significance and meaning and can serve as the basis for understanding someone.